Hey, welcome to the archives. So this is my last one for the day. It's not even planned. I don't have a script. I just wanted to talk about autism. I watched Mo this weekend, and one of the characters is on the spectrum. And I just started watching Extraordinary Attorney Woo, the Korean series, this evening. I just finished the first episode, and the main character is also autistic, and so autism has been on my mind. Today I actually had a conversation with a service provider looking into what the process for diagnosis would look like, how much it would cost. Uh, it's a private practice, obviously, so they do charge for autism assessment. She was telling me they're not starting anytime soon, until October. So even if I could afford it, I'd have to wait. But the fees, I believe, was like roughly $2,000. Um, and I know that's pretty. I've heard they're like thousands of dollars for autism testing. And one of the questions I asked was why. And I've asked somebody else before, because it's not covered under OHIP in Ontario. Um, which to me is interesting. And by interesting, I mean a little problematic, because one of the things I was telling her is often when you look at the statistics, if you look at mainstream media, if you know anything about autism growing up and even as an adult, my understanding is it tends to be something that happens within higher rates within the white community. Autism is usually framed as something that's like a white young white boys are the ones that are diagnosed with autism, and or adult white males are typically seen as the face of autism. Very rarely do we see people of color. Do we see Black autistic representation? Um, the series on Netflix, Love on a Spectrum, they have the I don't know if it's British or Australian version, and then they have the American version, which I recently watched as well too. But I think I've seen I think he's Indian, a brown man, some Latinx representation. There's an Indigenous woman from Australia, but I've seen a few Black people, but not any. I haven't seen any Black autistic representation, or maybe there was and I just forgot about it. Either way, all to say is you very rarely see Black autistic women, and there's a myriad of different reasons. Um, I know a lot of people. I saw, was it Imani's post? Somebody posted recently about disability diagnosis within the Black community, and how, especially for Black Americans with the history of slavery, the violence, sterilization, there's so many different reasons why a lot of Black people don't want to be seen as disabled or identify with disability, even if they're disabled, and for good reason. Because once you're viewed as disabled, most people tend to cast you out. You get thrown aside. You're now seen as disposable. Uh, People don't really have patience for you. They think you're weak, or they think you're making it up. Cap. Um, what else do they call you? Fraud. Um, right? You're cosplaying is a new thing. People are cosplaying as disabled. People are cosplaying as queer baiting. There's all of these narratives going on right now around people faking different things, and disability is one of them. Disability is often seen as like a bad word. It's like a hush word. Like you don't want to be like, why would you want to be disabled? Why would you want to take on that label? It's like all of these Western youth are just taking all of these labels. It's like the new thing. It's so cool. It's such a fad to be like oppressed right now. I'm like, I mean, I don't think that's what's happening, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to stick to the topic. What I wanted to talk about is for those who are struggling with neurodivergence. Again, it's not like this glamorous thing, right? I identify on the spectrum. Obviously, I'm verbal. I'm not nonverbal. I have, as a child, I don't believe I was nonverbal. I think, if anything, from my understanding, the stories I was told is I actually learned to speak quite early. Um, I was also fed fufu very early. So, like, I just was that little chubby baby who was eating solids before most kids were eating solids. I was walking before most kids were walking. I was talking before most kids were talking. Um, what would be some of my autistic traits? I think I've just always been, especially as a young immigrant who came here very early, I had to learn to pay attention to what this culture was like, right? I came here, from my understanding, when I was 6 years old. That was like a whole cultural shift that just threw me off. But because I'm not originally Canadian and I had to adjust to this cultural shift, I've always already been paying attention to how folks are moving, right? Like, I had to learn to fit in. I never really had an accent since I was young. I came here and the assumption was like I had to be I was an ESL learner. I was put in those classes and they realized very early that, like, actually she speaks English. Well, no shit. Our first language in Ghana is English, so I knew English. My identity has always been one as a student. That's something I'm struggling with right now as I transition out of university after almost 20 years of being a student. I'm figuring out, what does it mean to be me as not a student? Because that's all I've known since, I mean, you were like 6. I've been in school pretty much my whole life, almost 30 years of education, almost 20 of which were in higher learning. And so, from my understanding, that's called mirroring, right? When you're learning, when you're picking up. I saw a post recently that was like, bad traits of different astrologies, and Aquarius was like they pick up traits of personalities of other people. And my comment was like, actually, that's also just how we survive, or like I survive, is you have to pay attention to what is normal, because if you deviate off of that, that always came with punishment, that always came with something negative, a repercussion, a consequence, right? So from very young, I've been learning how kids in my class moved. I've always, again, being like the Black African girl child, I've always had to be better than most people, especially in school. But I was that little girl who's sitting at the window when everybody's sitting listening to the teacher tell a story, and I'm sitting at the window gazing out, probably daydream. Who knows what? I still am always daydreaming. What else? Anyways, I'm not going to get into that, but I know I've been different, whatever that different means. I'm even struggling with taking on autism, not even just in terms of disability, but around language. And we get misdiagnosed, right? We either get misdiagnosed as borderline personality, depression, and probably you can still be autistic and depressed. But there's so many different ways in which we are missed and just fall through the cracks or go under the radar. We're seen as angry, we're bitter. It's just, she's just behavioral issues. So getting suspended. And we can't afford those tests. Even if I know some people, when like I came from a family that refused to have us do those tests because my parents, my mom didn't want us to have those labels. Like, you are not autistic, you don't have ADHD. That's like this Western white thing, and you can rise above. Don't fall into this like pit that they are trying to push you in. Right? You are better than that. You are above that. It's just another way in which they are holding you down. That's kind of the concept that some of us were raised with. And so it's been really strange navigating that. But like, even if I did want to get the test, who is $2,000 for that? Right? And because we can't afford it, then it's like, well, they don't have it. Black girls don't struggle with autism. Black girls are not autistic. They don't look autistic. They're not autistic in the same ways as like white boys are. they can speak, or they don't have these quirks, or and so we get missed. And that's all I wanted to say. I don't have much to say because I'm still learning a lot of it myself. I recently learned that like Asperger's is like anti-Semitic, and like he was a Nazi, and it's not appropriate to use that term. I still see people using that term. It came up in Mo. Um, uh, Low functioning, high functioning. When I first was learning about this, those were terms that people were using and throwing around, and so I adopted it. That I learned is problematic. It's a spectrum. There's no high, low. I know a lot of parents of autistic people get really upset that like folks like myself who moves through the world as fairly non-autistic looking, representing moving, are claiming it, right? Because like it's very challenging. Their kids are throwing temper tantrums, and their kids can't read, or they're nonverbal, and it's like all it's not glamorous, and the difficult, challenging aspects of it. People think that like we kind of overlook, or we don't have those same struggles. Like my body's in constant pain. I'm highly sensitive. I feel a lot of different things. Um, I'm just not loud about certain things, right? Like growing up, uh, certain textures used to make me literally cry. I had to learn to get over that because you can't, like, I can't move through a world crying because I don't like popcorn ceiling, right? Just even certain blanket materials, certain clothing, like there's certain things that just really bother me, but I can't make a big deal out of it because you're seen as like a little bitch, or like, excuse my word, language, or like as a pussy, excuse my language. But these are the things that you're called, right? You're being a baby, you're being weak, you're acting like a white person. These are the how we frame it within my communities, and so I don't talk about those things. It just kind of swallow it. Eye contact, like I actually had to learn to like look in people in their eyes. Um, and like for me, as somebody that's highly sensitive, I feel like I can see right into people's souls, especially when someone has bad energy. Have you ever looked at somebody's eye who's just like bad mind? It's like, oh my God, you're sucking me into hell. Like eye contact is very strange for me. Social cues, just being blunt, being very honest, telling the truth when it's not appropriate, saying things that are not appropriate, doing things that are not appropriate. Like there's all of these different ways of being that for me is totally normal, that I obviously would not show in public. But then like when your life is like so whatever it is that I have, then people are like, well, she's really weird. She's super weird, right? Whereas like if I'm in public, I can mask that. I can step out, go to work, act normal, mask, perform, and then come home and then do me, right? And so like I would have definitely gone under the radar. I'm sure a lot of my friends would be like, Dee's not autistic, like she's just totally normal. Well, yeah, you have to be normal to pass in this world, to get by as a Black woman. All to say, who can afford those tests? Make those tests affordable or cheap, because that's literally our health. I'm not sure why people are paying $2,000 to get a diagnosis past a certain age, and stereotypes about autism in media representation. That's a whole thing. Autistic people deserve to be loved. Stop treating autistic people like we're children. Making like who still makes fun of people with disabilities in 2022? That's kind of disgusting. Like pick on somebody your own size. All right, bye.